Hello everyone, if you're watching this Edpuzzle, you are home on October 15th and 16th, and we are going to be wrapping up all integer operations. So we've covered absolute value, adding integers, subtracting, multiplying, and now dividing. So we're going to be wrapping up all those today. So let's take a look at number one. So one has 6 different questions there, and it's a mixture of everything we've learned so far. So again, if you need to grab a whiteboard or a piece of paper to record down your answers to follow along, that would be great. So you're not just listening, you can be an active participant with me. So 1A, so if you remember when we did this earlier this year, you've got numbers with different signs, so we cannot add them together. We actually have to subtract them, and that gives us a difference of 11, and I have more negatives, so my answer is going to be negative. Some of you have started thinking about it like money. If I only have 5, but I owe 16, I'm short $11. So some of you have been thinking about it that way. It's been helpful. When we looked at subtraction, we looked at adding the opposite. So in this case, that double negative becomes a positive, which will give us 12 for our answer. We're going to use the same technique for 1C. Again, I'm going to keep my first number, change subtraction to addition, and the opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. Again, that's a double negative that makes a positive. 10 plus a negative 3 is like saying I have $10 and I spent 3, I'll have 7 left. Absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. So we know that's 27 away from 0. When you're multiplying numbers, so this is, we did tiles like this. Remember we drew pictures? We said, if you're removing 8 groups of negative 5, well, you have to start with something. So we started with a whole bunch of 0 pairs, and we removed all the negatives, and all we had left were the positives. So a negative times a negative is a positive, and 8 times 5 is 40. And then same thing with our different signs, right? We want to make, and you can think of it like 9 groups. We're going to make 9 groups out of 45 negatives. So if I had 45 negatives drawn here and I wanted to make 9 groups, I'd have 5 in each group and they would all be negative. So when you divide, the same rules apply as when you multiply. Different signs, the answer is negative. Same signs, the answer is positive. Let's take a look. This should be number 2, but I carried it down as well. I think it was a mistype. So negative 3 minus 1. So I could rewrite it negative 3 plus a negative 1 if I wanted to. Still going to give me the same answer of negative 4. And it says select the 2 expressions that are equivalent or equal, right? So this one's negative 4. Let's try this one over here. Negative 3 plus 1. Well, if I only have 1 and I owe 3, I still owe 2. So far those two are not equivalent. Let's try this one, negative 3 plus a negative 1. So I'm going to add my 2 negatives together and keep the negative sign. So far these two are equivalent. And then this expression I want to rewrite using add the opposite. So the opposite of negative 1 is positive 1. If I only have 1 and I owe 3, this is the same expression up here, negative 2. So those two are equivalent. Let's take a look at number 2. We've got our first word problem. The data below shows the highest and lowest elevations for North America. Find the difference, which we know that means to subtract, between the highest and the lowest. So I've got my highest elevation down to 0 and then down below to our negatives. So my positive number is way up here, 20,350, and my negative number is way down here. And I want to know the total distance between them. So there's 2 ways to do it. One, you could start by using the word difference means to subtract, and you could start by subtracting those 2 amounts. That's one way to do it. Now, you know something about these double negatives now, or as we like to call, adding the opposite. So what's the opposite of a negative 250? Positive 250. So you might have heard me say find the total distance here. Another way to do this would have been to take the 20,350 and add it to the absolute value of negative 250, which if you know absolute value really well, you know that this number is a positive 250. So see how I've written an equivalent expression using absolute value and also using subtraction. So when we have to add those two together, so I kind of ran out of space a little bit, so 250. So 0 and 0 gives me 0, 5 and 5 gives me 10, carry the 1. 3 and 2 gives me 5 plus 1 is 6. So 20,600. And it would be feet. So I'll put that up here, 20,600 feet. All right, let's take a look at number 3. A submarine descended or went down, right? 4 feet per minute. So is that a positive or a negative? That's going to be a negative. 4 feet for every 1 minute. If the surface of the water is 0, which integer describes the position of the submarine after 8 minutes? So we're going down 4, down 4, down 4. And we're doing this 8 times. Well, I could rewrite it -4 plus -4 plus -4. I could do that 8 times and add it all together. But what's a quicker way to do that than writing this out 8 times? Hopefully you're saying, well, I would just multiply those two numbers together. So 4 times 8 is 32. And again, you've got different signs. So it's going to be -32 feet. Or you could say it's 32 feet below the surface of the water. Let's take a look at number 4. A corporation has earned a total profit of $1,419.25 since it was founded 5 years ago. So is it really a profit? Well, it's really more like a loss if it's negative. What is the average annual, which means per 1 year? So we don't want to know how much it lost. We're going to say lost really because it's negative. Over 5 years, we want to know how much per 1 year. So last year you might have written this as a rate, but we want to know how much is per 1 year, which means we're finding something called the unit rate. So instead of 5, we want 1 year. So what do you think we're going to do with those two numbers? Hopefully you're saying, well, I'm going to divide those two numbers. Now I'm going to leave the negative sign off for now just while I'm doing the division, and then I'll add it back in at the end for my answer. So 5 can't go into 1. This is a good chance to see how your division skills are holding up. 5 can go into 14 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. 14 take away 10 is 4. Bring down the 1. 5 goes into 40 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. Subtract gives us 1. Bring down the 9. 5 into 19 goes 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. 19 minus 15, 9 minus 5 is 4. I'm going to make sure I put my decimal here, and I'm going to bring down my 2. 42, 5 into 42. How many times is that going to go in? 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. Subtract to get 2. Bring down my last digit of 5. 5 into 25 goes 5 times. 5 times 5 is 25 with a remainder of 0, so I know I'm done. So my quotient or my answer is negative, because remember this is not really a profit because we started with a negative, $283.85 for every 1 year, because we know this is how much they lost over 5 years. So whenever you divide a negative by a positive, you end up with a negative answer. All right, so hopefully you don't have any questions on the front, which was a review of everything we've done so far. I'm going to flip over to the back. We have a couple more questions on the back. Let's take a look at number 5. Number 5 says, yesterday the temperature at noon was 11.4 degrees Fahrenheit. By midnight, the temperature had decreased by 15.3 degrees. What was the temperature at midnight? So we're starting at 11.4. So this is our first time seeing decimals, but I think you can handle it. Now it decreased, right? 15.3. So we were starting here at degrees. We're decreasing. I'm going to rewrite this as adding the opposite. And now I know I have different sign numbers. I want to subtract them. And when I subtract them here, I've got to borrow, right? Because I can't take 4 from 3. I've got to borrow. 13 minus 4 would be 9. Bring down my decimal. 4 minus 1 is 3. So my number is 3.9. But then I need to come back and say, do I have more positives or more negatives? Well, I was taking away more than I had. So negative 3.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's take a look at number 6. Which sum is further from 0? The sum, well, you have to know what the word sum means, huh? Sum means to add. If you didn't know that, it means to add. I'll help you out. So we want to find the sum of these two numbers or the sum of these two numbers. Now, these are both positive, these two numbers, and these are both negative. So when I add them together, I'm truly just adding the digits together. So 9 and 2 is 11. I carried the 1. 8 and 2 is 10, plus 1 more is 11. So we're at 211. Got a little crazy with the ones. 1, 2. Okay, let's see where this one is. 6 and 2 is 8. 9 and 1 is 10. Carry the 1. 2, so negative 208. So they want to know which sum is further from 0. Well, you have to think about which one's further. One's positive, so it's to the right of 0, and one's negative, it's to the left of 0. So in this case, it doesn't matter which direction you're going, it matters which one's further from 0. So we're almost looking at the absolute value of these numbers. And if you remember absolute value, you probably had the answer a couple seconds ago. The sum that gives us the 211 is further from 0. So in this case, it ended up being the two positive numbers that we added together. All right, let's take a look at number 7. James plays in the backfield of Big Town football. Last week, he ran 4 plays from the halfback position. He made some gains, right? So some of them might be positive or negative since it's in quotes. Some might be losses, measured in yards of 3, 6, 1, and negative 5. What was his average? So if you forgot how to find average, which another word for average is the mean, you have to first add all your numbers and then divide by how many you added together. So in this case, let's add up our 3, our 6, our 1, and our negative 5. So let's add our positives together. 3 plus 6, 9 plus 1, 10 plus a negative 5. That gives me, what do you guys think? 5. So am I done? Did I do both steps? Well, I've added everything together. My positives were 10, my negatives were negative 5. I got 5. Now I need to divide by how many numbers I added together, which is 4. Well, 4 can go into 5 one time. But then what do I do from here? So hopefully you remember in elementary school, you might have to add a decimal. Okay, now you could write your answer as a fraction, which would be okay. So if you stopped here, it'd be 1 and 1/4, because our whole number is here 1 and 1/4. I'm going to keep going to show you what it would look like as a decimal. I'm going to add a 0 and bring it down. 4 into 10 goes twice. 2 times 4 is 8. Add another 0 and bring it down. So I subtracted to get 2. 4 into 20 goes 5 times. So 1 1/4 is the same as 1.25. If you already knew that, good job. So the average is 1.25, and our number was positive, and we divided by a positive, so our average is a positive. Let's take a look at number 8. I think number 8 is probably the most in-depth question that we're going to do today. A submarine dove 800 feet. It rose, which means it came back up, at a rate of 22 feet per minute. What was the depth of the submarine after 10 minutes? So we're coming up 10 times, and they want to know, where is the submarine going to be? Remember my really awesome drawings? It kind of looks like a fish, doesn't it? That's why I'm not an art teacher, everyone. So we know it's way down here at negative 800. We know it's coming up. How fast is it coming up? 22 feet per minute, and it's doing that 10 times over again. So I could add 22, 22, 22, 22, 20. I could add it all together over and over again. Or remember, we could do 22 times 10. Well, 22 times 1 is 22, and just add your 0. So that means that it's going to be coming up 220 feet. Now, do you think it's going to reach the surface? Hopefully you're saying no, because we're down here at negative 800, and we're coming up 220 feet. So let's write our statement. We're down here at negative 800, and we're rising 220 feet. We've already established our answer is going to be negative. We're not coming up the full distance. But we need to figure out where we're going to be. So when you add numbers with different signs, you're really subtracting them. So I've got to borrow. 10 minus 2 is 8. 7 minus 2 is 5. So we're at negative 580 feet. So we did not make it back to the surface. Luckily, we're in a submarine, though. Number 9. Over the past 7 days, Mrs. Corell found the temperature outside had dropped a total of 35 degrees. Because it had dropped, the number is negative. Find the average change each day. So let's go back. Over the past 7 days. So what are we going to do with it? We don't want to know, well, that's great. It dropped 35 degrees in 7 days. We want to know how much per 1 day. So what do we have to do to those two numbers? Well, some of you might be saying, hey, Mrs. Corell, you wrote this as a fraction. Fraction means to divide. So if you already knew that, awesome job. 7 goes into 35 5 times, and I'm dividing different signs, so negative 5 degrees. Last one, everyone. Number 10, a submarine descends at a rate of 60 feet each minute. how long will it take to descend to a depth of 480 feet below the surface? So we know we're going to be going down 480 feet. We're going each time 60 feet down. They want to know how many times will we have to do that to get to 480. Oh, there's two ways to think about this. You could think about 60 times what number will get me down to that depth. That's one way. Some of you might be thinking about it that way. Or some of you might be saying, well, I'm down here at this depth. I'm going to break it up into groups of 60 feet. How long is that going to take me? Or how long will it take? Sorry. So in this case, I've got 60 times something gives me 480. So there's a little trick. If you cover up the zeros, now it's just 6 times what gives me 48. Might be remembering. What do you think? 8? So 8 minutes maybe? Okay, because we're in minutes. Let's try this one. I'm going to cover up my zeros. 48 divided by 6 is 8. So 8 minutes. And this makes sense. A negative divided by a negative is a positive because we're talking about time. We're not going back in time. We're talking about 8 minutes. So you could have done it forward by multiplying. Maybe your brain just thought of it that way, or backwards, but the answer is still 8 minutes. All right, so today's activity is these notes on Edpuzzle. There's a little bit of practice, and then there is a Google form. So make sure you take your time on the Google form, and I hope you're having a great day at home.